So maybe you've considered a vintage watch, but you don't know if you should pull the trigger yet, or maybe you haven't even dipped your toe in the vintage market. These are my thoughts on why I think you should look into vintage watches. What's up guys, hope you guys have all been well and staying safe. Welcome back to another video. A few weeks back I made a video on reasons why I think you should not look into vintage watches and my opinions on that. And I did mention that in the future I would be making on videos on why I think you should look into vintage watches, because obviously there's pros and there's cons to everything, right? So here are reasons why you might want to look into something from ye olden times. Now, what I've done is I've broken this down into three major points. Number one, being your value for the money. Number two, being finding something significant. And number three, being finding something unique. Number two and three might sound like they're similar points or maybe sound like they're the same point, but trust me, they're quite different, and I'll explain why in just a second. Before we start, I want to say that the examples and points in this video assume no common issues of buying vintage watches. So things like shady dealers, Franken watches, inauthentic pieces are considered non-factors for the sake of argument of this video. So let's start with number one. That's going to be value for money. So you work hard for your money. I work hard for my money, so why not get something that gives you the most out of your dollars, right? Well, as it turns out, buying something vintage is a great way to do just that. There's a ridiculous amount of cheap watches on the vintage market, especially from watchmakers that mass produce, brands like Timex, brands like Citizen, Seiko, Seagull, you name it. And when I say cheap, I mean like really cheap, like $30 cheap. Now, I'm not even referring to just watches that are that low in price. I'd argue that even this Tudor that you see right here offers fantastic value for the price tag. Now, I get to have something that comes from generations ago with a classical look that's also mechanically sound. Now, of course, as you start to up the price to something around the $3,000 to $5,000 mark, I would start considering whether it's maybe worth getting something that's a bit more modern, just from a reliability, durability, and functionality standpoint. However, there's of course no modern replacement for something like a Rolex 1603, meaning if I'm looking for a Rolex 1603, I want a Rolex 1603, and I'm gonna get just that. A modern day Oyster Perpetual or Datejust probably won't satisfy my needs for that classic Rolex from years and years ago. Which moves you on to point number two, which is going to be finding something significant. So it goes without saying that something that isn't made anymore is automatically going to be more significant, just out of the fact that, well, it doesn't exist anymore. And when I say something significant, I mean more so significant to you or to somebody, and that significance being the very reason that you buy it. So just give me a second, I'll give you an example. So let's say your dad or your mom or whoever is into watches, and let's say they were born in 1950, let's say. Okay, so you want to offer this person a special gift for their birthday or some kind of special occasion. So why not get them a watch from the very year that they were born? I think that's about as meaningful and as cool as a gift can be, getting a watch that's literally as old as you are from the very year that you were born. Especially being a watch enthusiast, an idea like this will without a doubt put a smile on their face, and it's going to be a gift that they're going to cherish for a very, very long time. Now, number three is going to be the fact that there's many unique pieces to be found. So throughout watchmaking history, there's definitely been no shortage of significant timepieces. And when I say significant, I mean things like the Sherpa, which was used on Mount Everest expeditions, which you can get for about $1 to $1.5 grand, or the Seiko 5740C, which was Seiko's very first high beat movement, beating at an exceptionally smooth 36,000 vibrations per hour. And this is the watch that paved the way for the Grand Seiko that you know today. You can get this for as low as $500. There's no question it adds a very special relationship to and the romance to your timepiece, knowing it was one of the pioneers of, say, aviation, or the pioneers of the brand's entry into horology. It's the kind of significance that you just can't really find elsewhere, or maybe even in modern times. And speaking of modern times, especially, as you know, most of the watch innovations have already sort of been discovered. So it's already becoming increasingly rare to find a watch that's horologically significant, let's say. And I think that's why brands like Tudor, Breitling, IWC are putting so much effort into remaking tributes to watches from their past. Watches like the Tudor Black Bay 58, the Breitling Super Ocean 57, the JLC Master Ultra Thin Kingsman. They have one thing in common, and that is they offer you a modern day example of a watch from generations and generations ago. So my point is, why not look on the vintage market and find the real OG? I get it. It's not always going to be cheap. if you can't afford it, or if you do find a watch that is significant as well as being cheap, I think that's value that is tremendous and, to be honest, unbeatable. So those are my top 3 reasons why I think you should look into the vintage market. If you guys have any other reasons why you have looked into the vintage market, or maybe why you have not looked into vintage watches, I'm very curious to hear your opinions and your thoughts. So please leave me a comment below. And on that note, I hope you guys have enjoyed the video. Please leave me a like and subscribe, and we'll see you next time. Stay safe.